RNC, the president expected to speak for about an hour.
Let's dive in with our two KTLA 5 political analysts, political consultant Matt Klink and the founding director of UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, Sonia Diaz. Welcome to you both. And Matt, let's start with you. We just heard Lauren Lister mention that President Trump is expected to mention the unrest, the civil unrest throughout the country in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting. Do you feel that he actually addresses that in his speech tonight? And also, this is all about re-election. He has to talk about his, what he's done in the past 3.5 years and what he plans to do in the next 4 years.
Sure. You're going to hear Donald Trump tonight give a full-throated defense of his 3.5 years in the White House, about he's tried to clear out the swamp and all of the things that he has done for the American people. And I would expect him to bring up the riots and the violence that we've seen in many American cities, Kenosha being just the latest example, and really trying to draw a very stark contrast with what his approach pro-law and order would be, and counter that with the Democrats' soft-on-crime approach. In fact, to the point where you've hardly seen Joe Biden or Kamala Harris speak about the rioters. They'll talk about the protests all they want, but they don't talk about the rioters and the violence and the damage that it has caused to families and the deaths of police officers across this country. So that's the contrast that he wants. People in California and in other places are certainly not going to like it. They're going to call it inaccurate. But again, he's not campaigning in California. He's campaigning for swing state voters. And if you look at the polling, those gaps are closing.
Sonia, as you know, an enormous opportunity for the president tonight to appeal to moderates and independents who may well decide this election. What do you see?
I see an attack on VP Joe Biden. We've already heard about how many years Joe Biden has been in Washington, D.C. That seems to be a talking point that the RNC has adopted. The other one being that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are anti-law and order, which is absurd for many reasons, one of which Kamala Harris has spent her entire career in law enforcement, absent her time in the U.S. Senate. I also expect Donald Trump to talk about the economy, but I wonder if there's going to be any nuance to all of the Americans who are having trouble during the coronavirus pandemic. I'm also wondering if he will follow suit of Melania Trump and actually acknowledge all of the lives that have been lost due to the mishandling of the pandemic. Finally, I think that Donald Trump and the RNC are not campaigning for control of Congress. Orange County and many other Republican seats are up for grabs in California, as are toss-up seats across the country. And there doesn't seem to be a lot of talk about Congress. I know we had Mitch McConnell today. Mitch McConnell is not a supporter of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. He's not a supporter of fair policing, and he has been wildly successful in placing white men to the federal judiciary.
All right, the finale of the RNC tonight, President Donald Trump making his speech, which should last about an hour, we're told. And of course, we want to say thank you to you, Matt Klink, and Sonia Diaz, our political analyst, and we'll see you back here a little bit later in the program.
You watched it here live on KTLA 5, the final night of the Republican National Convention, just wrapping up moments ago. Let's unpack what we've heard tonight.
Yeah, certainly a lot to unpack. We are joined by our KTLA 5 panel of political analysts, political consultant Matt Klink, and civil rights attorney and founding director of the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, Sonia Diaz. I guess, I want to know, Matt, what you think about the tone of President Trump's acceptance speech tonight.
I think there were two distinct tones here. The first overtone was clearly that Joe Biden is a serious threat to America in the future. And then the second tone or overtone was that there is a definite different way that Donald Trump would support. And if you think about the convention that we've heard over the last 4 days, all of the speakers and all of the guests built on either one of those two overtones. There were I'll scare you, that Joe Biden is dangerous, that the Democrats are socialists, that the riots in Democratic cities are coming to your neighborhood unless you vote for Donald Trump. And then you had other people that talked objectively or seemingly objectively, and tried to be optimistic about what the Trump agenda would mean for 4 more years. It's tough to balance those two polar opposites, but I think that they tried their best to get that done, and the proof will be in the pudding come Election Day.
Sonia, I'll open the floor. Your reaction to what you heard tonight.
Yeah, it was a very long speech, and it wasn't until the last 5 to 7 minutes that Donald Trump actually started talking about what a plan for re-election may look like and what he would do policy-wise. Even then, it was pretty sparse. One of the things to contextualize this is that Trump is behind in the polls. Trump also, across his presidency, has never went above the 50% threshold in terms of approval ratings, which are really important for understanding Americans' support or disdain for a president. Now, with the speech, there was another focus on the terror that would subsume this country if VP Biden is successful. And I want to note that both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have a similar talking point, which is that this is the most important election of our lifetime. And then to follow that up, that the election will determine whether or not America survives. Now, from there, there's clear divergences, but what both parties are saying is that there is a horror to be known to everybody if one candidate wins over the others. For Donald Trump and the Republican Party, they are losing a lot of support from key Republicans. We saw a bit of this in 2016, but former staffers of Romney, of McCain, and of other Republican heavyweights have come out and endorsed VP Biden. We also know that the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, longtime supporter of the Republican Party, is bucking tradition and supporting a lot of Democrats running for Congress. So the party is at a crossroads. I don't know that that crossroads got narrower after Donald Trump's acceptance speech tonight.
We want to take a look at some of the things that he said throughout the hour-and-a-half speech. It was mostly about two philosophies, two agendas. He hit hard on Biden, as you would expect, as they did in the DNC, hit hard on Trump, and talked a lot about what the unrest is, the unrest that's happening across the country. Let's take a listen.
At the Democrat National Convention, Joe Biden and his party repeatedly assailed America as a land of racial, economic, and social injustice. So tonight I ask you a simple question. How can the Democrat Party ask to lead our country when it spends so much time tearing down our country?
Your thoughts on that part of his speech? We'll start with you, Sonia.
I think that it's fascinating. This has been in conservative news for the big portion of summer. What's interesting about Donald Trump is he's never made mention of George Floyd. He has made little mention of police misconduct and instead has used the righteous anger that we're observing across the country, not just in our urban cities that are democratically controlled, but elsewhere. The movement for Black Lives has been the largest movement in American history around protesting. We are seeing what is occurring in Wisconsin, and frankly, it's devastating. Nobody should be killed in front of their children less than 7 feet away from a police officer. And so Donald Trump is not making mention of that. We saw VP Pence yesterday make mention of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. This is really important. It is a dangerous job. No one is arguing about that. But the actual instance that VP Mike Pence made was a right-wing person who killed a law enforcement officer. So it can't go both ways. We can't see neo-Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, being able to exert and engage in First Amendment freedom of expression while also violently hurting other people, and then see mothers, children, grandmothers in Portland, in Wisconsin, in Los Angeles do the same thing, but be met with tear gas or weapons of mass destruction. So it is a really important frame. It's not new to this country. This is akin to the frame that we've seen in the late 1960s, but it's rare to have the actual president of the United States using this instead of other types of surrogates.
Matt, as you heard tonight, the president drawing a nexus between danger on the streets and Democrats in charge of those cities.
Yeah, I mean, look, Micah, I don't have to, I disagree with what Sonia just said, but I mean, look no further than the violence and the rioting that you have seen in cities run by Democrats across the United States. And the reason why that the Republican Party has continued to make the concerns known to the suburbs is because the poll numbers are plummeting. Black Lives Matter poll numbers are dropping like a stone. People are scared because in these cities, the mayors and the governors have failed to take control and the mob has ruled. It is very relevant to be supportive of the protesters, but oppose violence. And the Democrats' constant opposition to law enforcement does not soothe the rioters, and it certainly doesn't make the average Joe and Mary citizen feel comfortable that the Democrats have their best interests in mind. And that's what the poll numbers are showing now. And in all those swing states, which are all important for this election, the nation doesn't matter. It's about 9 swing states. The numbers are all tightening, and largely because of this issue.
Right, and the president in his speech saying that he would never allow mob rule and that this is a problem that can easily be fixed, and just to call. We're going to take a quick break here on this final night of the Republican National Convention. President Trump just finished his speech, and when we come back, we'll have more analysis and an in-depth look at tonight's events.
We are once again joined by our panel of analysts.
Matt Klink, political consultant, civil rights attorney, and founding director of the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Initiative, Sonia Diaz. To both of you, your final thoughts. Sonia?
Yeah, the nation is divided. I think that was clear from last week's DNC convention and the RNC convention today. Throughout Trump's speech, we only heard mention of the coronavirus as we've heard it from this party, which is that it arose from China. We haven't really got into the meat of how it's impacted families, the Americans that have been lost, the people that are out of jobs, and the work that we need to do to restore safety, even amidst a conclusion that we need to be reopening schools. I don't know how that's going to play with white female voters across this country, but I'm at a loss. It has been an interesting evening.
Matt, was it a successful message from the president?
I think that you're going to see the race close in the coming month. You're going to see that the 3 presidential debates are going to take on added importance, given both candidates' tendency to misstate and misspeak and get confused. And I think that whoever performs best in the debates will ultimately be successful come November 3rd, and Election Day will be chaos. We will not know who wins until mid-November, and it will be a full employment act for election law attorneys.
That is his prediction right there. We might be able to play that back on November 3rd
Got it
for
on
sure.
tape.
Yeah, we do. Thank you so much, Matt Klink and Sonia Diaz, for all of your expert analysis for the last 2 weeks. Really, we do appreciate it. It has been an interesting night for sure, and we do thank you for watching the finale of the RNC and President Trump's speech.
The home stretch of the campaign begins. 67 days until Election Day. We'll be with you all along the way. We'll see you back here for the news at 10.